Welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm James DiClemente here with Ryan Loshaw. Ryan, why don't you tell us what our audience can expect from this series?
In this series, we'll review the training officer side of Prodigy to show you as an organization how you can manage your department's continuing education and recertification. And we have two sides of Prodigy. There's the provider side, where our mission is to provide an easy-to-use platform with quality content and then training plans that allow you to show your percent to completion for your state or national recertification. And then from the training officer side, we want to give you the tool set to be either as hands-on or as hands-off with recertification as you need to be.
So Ryan mentioned the two different components of Prodigy. We do have a documentation site for the training officer side. It's just docs.prodigyems.com, and we'll leave a link. And that will walk you through specifically how every feature on Prodigy works through video and articles to walk you through all of what we're going to talk about today. We're mainly going to focus on the training officer side or the administrator side of Prodigy, but I do think it's important to dive a bit into the course catalog, which is for us the foundation of what we offer. We have over 350 hours worth of content that you can choose to assign to your providers in a variety of topics, in a variety of looks, in a variety of styles to make sure you're getting the content that you need to those providers. The other part of the user side that Ryan mentioned was the training plans. Ryan, can you talk a little bit about how a training plan works for a provider in Prodigy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when a department across the country is looking for a new LMS or moving into a digital experience for continuing education recertification, they're looking for a couple different things. The first is ease of use. Ease of use is a big focus of ours. When we speak with providers across the country, the biggest thing that we hear is that they simply don't know what to take. So we built this training plan feature in Prodigy where you can enter your certification, whether it's a state or national, in any license level, and the system's automatically going to take that license level and whether it's a state or national and build you a training plan for it. And then it'll give you your percent to completion for that training plan between the issue date and the expiration date of your certification. So as you take those courses on Prodigy, I can see how they apply towards my recertification.
So Ryan just talked about kind of the training plan functionality from the user side. I think now we'll switch over to the training officer side.
From the training officer side, they want to be either hands-on or hands-off with that recertification and continuing education experience, and they want the tool set to be able to do that. And so one thing that I think we've done really well is as we've made content and as we've navigated the platform, we've opened up the same way we make classes, we run reports, we monitor certifications to the training officer so they can have the same experience we do from the administrative side.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Our goal was to try to create a modern web experience that's simple to use. And I like to look at it as kind of the three pillars of what an LMS should be. And I think that first one is the platform. So many of these platforms make it more difficult for you to do your job. They're clunky, they're difficult to navigate, they're using old technology. And I think part of what we try to do here at Prodigy is continually give you a new digital experience. We have a full-time development team, which is just such a great asset for us. They are constantly working to try to make Prodigy better, whether it's small tweaks on the back end to make it a little bit faster or some big new feature. I think continuing to do that is important. And certainly that digital experience is going to lead into the content and how do you absorb that content, and it's that content distribution. And we try to take a real modern approach to this as well. Video is notoriously difficult to deal with, and we have spent many developer hours trying to figure out how do we get you a video where you are, when you need it, how you need it, and not using old technology that we see a lot of other LMSs using. But I think our content is really what we try to set ourselves apart on, and how do we produce that content. And I think, from Ryan's standpoint, doing the demos, we try to push, yes, you can customize this and you can make it your own, but you can also use this great library of content. And, Ryan, I'll ask, what do you think are some of the classes that you get the most excitement about, or some of the classes that people are just really excited to get out to their providers?
Yeah, so I think the most exciting thing that providers experience from the provider side of Prodigy is that there's always a new experience when they go to that course catalog. Every time they go there, whether they're doing their local section of their national registry or the NCCR, or they're doing their state training plan, there's always new and up-to-date content that meets their needs, whether it's the resuscitation masterclass that really does a deep dive into specific topics. Maybe it's a podcast, that Medic Mindset podcast, where Ginger Locke does a really good job of deep diving into specific call types for the EMS provider. Or it's a Resuscitation Academy, which we've built a 6-hour version of Seattle Medic One's Resuscitation Academy class out in Seattle.
Yeah, and I think for us, we want this to feel like it's a conference. We purposely don't give our instructors any guidance on how to make their presentation or give them any style guidelines. We want it to feel like a conference where you're going to see different presenters, you're going to see different styles, you're going to feel differently when you go into an individual class. And I think that's what we try to do. We try to talk to the instructors, figure out how can we get your information out to people. Is that a lecture? Is that a podcast? Is that an interview? Is that a live webinar? What can we do to get that message out? And Ryan had mentioned some of the podcasts that we do. We have some just unbelievable podcast relationships where you're able to get continuing education credit for some of your favorite podcasts. And again, just try to bring those industry leaders, those industry experts, those industry educators onto Prodigy to give you this unique and ever-developing experience of education.
And we realize from the provider standpoint that sometimes recertification is difficult to know exactly, what do I need to take? And our training plan does a good job of taking those classes that you take on the platform and applying them to either your state or national certification, and then giving you a progress towards my percent to completion for that certification. So I know the classes in which I'm taking is building the building blocks to get me towards my recertification.
Yeah, and those training plans were designed in a way to feel like they were a simple part of the platform, but to be dynamic as you take classes. So we make it really easy. You put in a certification for one of your providers, they put in a certification, and we'll automatically populate a training plan. So we maintain state training plans for most states, but we also maintain the local requirements. So if I put in a national registry certification from Alaska, my certification is going to have different requirements than I put one in from Massachusetts, because Alaska has a different set of requirements. Rhode Island has a different set of requirements. Connecticut has a different set of requirements. So we're able to bring those local classes in, and all you simply have to do is give us your state and your certification level, and we'll do all the rest. And there's also the ability to customize those training plans. Ryan, from a department standpoint, what have you seen departments using our customization of the training plans for?
Yeah, so the training officer often likes to embed that native in-person experience into a digital experience. And so, maybe you're a training officer and you want to focus the month of January on airway. The platform allows you to build a collection of classes, and those might be classes in which you create or classes that we have into an easy-to-use training plan that breaks down those classes into a number of hours, number of categories, and that training plan can lay over top of that national registry or state training plan as well too. And the nice thing about that is, from a provider standpoint, if I'm assigned something by a training officer, I want to know that the classes that I'm taking concurrently or how they complete the classes for my national or my state certification. Or maybe you're going to do like a quarterly training plan. You're going to say this quarter we're going to focus on this group of classes or a portion of that registry recertification, and you could do that. Or maybe you're going to do a new employee onboarding training plan and you want to really systemize the way, and maybe you're a large organization, you want to systemize the way new employees come into your organization so that it's always consistent with every single employee that comes there. Or maybe you want to put your policies and procedures into a training plan so that there's an easy place for providers to go because maybe they learned something in a classroom experience, but they want to go back in and rewatch or review that policy, that procedure, that protocol, and wherever it may be.
Yeah, I think those are all really great examples. And it's important to recognize that anything you see on your certification training plan can also be applied to your custom training plan. So you're able to add all the same features. You can do a mix of our classes and your classes. It can be for any number of reasons. I think one of the examples Ryan gave, that new employee training plan, is a really popular one. And you can mix and match. So our class builder is designed to allow you to do traditional online classes, maybe some videos and documents, audio files that you review, take a quiz, and you get your credit. So obviously those can be on your training plan. But we can also track in-person training. So we have a whole system built where you can put in a class that people can register for an in-person class. We can manage the rosters. We can manage completions. But those requirements, even though they're solely in person, can be placed on a training plan. So as the employee, I know that this 30 hours of training is all included in my new employee training. Some of it may be in person, some of it may be virtual online, some of it may be fully distributive in an online class, but it's all managed through a training plan. We wanted to give you a single place where all of your training can be tracked, managed, and deployed. And that's what we've tried to do in a mix of the training plans and the class builder. Now, we'll be doing a deep dive into training plans in a later episode of this series, but I think it's important to recognize the power of that feature in really simplifying recertification or agency training. And this is where we've tried to separate ourselves as a platform in trying to make it easy. If I'm a provider, I put in my National Registry Paramedic, and Prodigy is going to show me exactly what I need to do. Which of the Prodigy classes count towards the different categories, which count towards my local and individual, where my options are to complete classes, and we try to give you options in all of those categories. We also know what those requirements are. So if you put in a certification that expires in 2025, you'll see a different National Registry training plan than if you put in a 2026, because that transition in the National Registry NCCP requirements is going to happen between those two dates. So you're seeing exactly what you need to do and exactly how you need to do it. And our goal is to continually evolve these training plans. We want to add new classes. We want to add new functionality. You can track outside training in here as well. So if you took a class outside of Prodigy and you want your training plan to reflect that, there's a simple button. You can upload a certificate, add in some details, and then that completion will be reflected in your training plan to make it easy to complete. And even on the custom training plan side, we've seen this outside completion used. We'll have agencies that have a case review or an M&M round requirement. They have to go to hospitals, they have to go to local EMS agencies, wherever they need to go in order to complete this. It's not done on Prodigy for them, but they're able to upload that as an outside completion, so that training plan is still tracking that requirement. So this gives you a way to set training requirements and have a very easy way to track and manage those training requirements. And I think that brings us into our class builder, which for me is one of the more exciting features of Prodigy, because our idea in the class builder wasn't to simply give you a place to upload some videos, but to give you a place where you can curate content that's going to make your providers better in the field. So when you go into our class builder, again, it's that same kind of ease of use. We want to keep it simple. We want to limit the amount of information that you have to put in, but still give you all of the other opportunities to manage these. So when you come into a class builder, you're going to give us some simple details. You're able to make this a credit class or non-credit class. You're able to add in a state continuing education number. You can add in imagery and give that class kind of a feel that it's your class, but it doesn't feel like it's separated in the Prodigy catalog. And in this setup, one of the other interesting features that we have is the opportunity to make these classes either available to everybody in the catalog or set them up for very specific uses. So you can have a class that can only be taken by assignment. Unless I specifically assign you that class, you're not able to complete it. And this may be for some annual high stakes exam or some class that's only used for remediation. And then we have this third bucket of training, which can only be completed if it's on a training plan, but isn't immediately visible in the catalog. And again, this just gives you the opportunity to manage the classes exactly like you need to. You know, I worked as a training officer, I worked as a director of education. I understand what some of the needs are for training at an organization, and that gives us the ability to manage it in all the different ways that we can. So once we set up that class, then we can add material to it. Maybe I'm uploading my own video. Maybe I'm adding a YouTube video, a podcast. I'm adding a PDF document. I just have a simple reading assignment with some text. Maybe I'm sending them to an external web page. I'm bringing all of this material in to make sure, again, that I'm curating content that's going to help build this class, rather than say, okay, I'm going to upload a video that I just created because I had no other option to do that. So we allow you to curate that. You can add in quizzes, whether it's a final quiz or quizzes in the middle. And again, we've tried to make this a simple experience, but also create some opportunities for you to make this class feel a little bit more dynamic. You can upload an audio file to a question or a answer. You can upload a video. You can upload an image. We have classes in there that are uploading videos from iSimulate showing a waveform on capnography and then asking a question about what you're seeing in that waveform. Again, it's a distributive class, but as a small dynamic element where I'm visually looking at a recording and making a clinical decision based off of what I would see in the field. And that just gives this class a little bit different feeling, and trying to make it something that is more dynamic than just, here's a question, here's some answers. And then within there, you can build your own certificate. So if you want to customize a certificate, you can do that, or add a survey. At the end of class, perhaps you just want to get some general feedback. How did they like the class? Did you learn what you needed to learn from that class? Is there anything we should do differently in this class? And that will just give you some opportunity to improve this class and iterate on this class in the future. Just like the rest of Prodigy, we hope that as a training officer, when you build a class, you continually improve and look for opportunities to tweak that class to better meet the needs as protocols change, as equipment changes. And we try to make it simple for you to manage those classes while it's this kind of daunting task of editing. Ryan, obviously you're talking to a lot of training officers. What are they using this for? How are they fixing problems with the class builder?
Yeah, so one of the big pain points we see from a training officer standpoint is the kind of the telephone game that can happen within an organization where maybe A shift gets a little bit different training than B shift, then D shift, then night shift, then day shift. And so by using the class builder, I can have this kind of continuity of delivery. And maybe I'm going to embed my Zoom or my Teams link into it to host a natively live class. First off, maybe I'm having my medical director that's coming on. They're doing a run review, but maybe all my providers can't attend that course. So then I can take the recording of that Zoom, I can make a class out of that, and I can send it out to all the providers that missed that class. So everybody gets that same experience across the organization.
Yeah, and I think that's, just such a great use for any distributive training. And I can tell you, not to reminisce too much about why we started Prodigy, but one of the reasons that we wanted to push to a customized online platform was exactly what Ryan just mentioned. And I was a director of education at the time, and we were doing training for, about a dozen different departments. And I had a department call me and say that they heard something from one of our educators that they didn't think was correct, and they wanted them to come back out and redo the training. And we talked to the educator, and it seemed like maybe they were referencing some research that wasn't quite implemented in the protocols yet. But we went back out and did the training because they didn't feel like they got what they needed. And this is where a learning management system is so powerful, where this was lecture-based content. This can be done online. And we don't want to say you should do less in-person training. I think you should do the same amount of in-person training. But let's use that in-person training for areas that will be more impactful for. Let's do some hands-on training. Let's do some training that involves team communication, that involves resuscitation, getting my hands on a mannequin, using some new equipment, whatever it happens to be. Let's use that valuable, precious in-person time to do things that can only be done in person. Like Ryan said, on the Prodigy platform, you're able to do virtual live training through there. So it couldn't be bringing your medical director on a Zoom, having them teach live, letting the providers interact with them. They can register, and that's all managed through Prodigy. And then that recording just comes up as part of that same class. And this is one of the unique features of the way Prodigy classes are handled, and that a single class can have all three take types. So let's say I have an airway class, and that airway class is being taught virtual live, so through a Zoom. It's being taught live in person. There's a live audience there for the Zoom. And then later, the recording is going to be uploaded to Prodigy. That single class is actually handling all three registrations. So you can register for the live in person, and maybe we limit the amount of registrations. You can register for the virtual live, and again, we could limit the amount of registrations or leave that open. And then you'll come in and take the distributive there. So as a training officer, I'm not trying to reconcile three different rosters. I'm not trying to, let's say, okay, who took my live, who is on the Zoom, and then who's done it online? Has everybody done this class? I can look at a single report for a single class, and I can say 100% of my organization has completed this quarterly airway class in just that single instance. And that's unique in how we track, and we are doing this to try, again, for you as a training officer, to make the program simpler and not just add more difficulty because now you have more take types for an individual class. Right, can you talk a little bit about how this works for training officers that oversee more than one department?
Yeah, so any class that you create on Prodigy, we give you the ability, if you're a training officer that oversees multiple departments, to share it with as few or as many of those departments as you need to.
Yeah, and that class sharing is what helps you as a training officer for multiple departments do that management from a single hub, and then allow those other departments that you manage to also have access to what you're doing. And we've tried to do this in many areas of Prodigy, and as we deep dive into these different features, we can talk about them. But on Prodigy, you can actually be a member of multiple organizations. And we recognize that EMS, especially in different geographical areas, is dynamic, and people are moving from service to service. They're going to be in multiple services at the same time. Maybe they're part of an organization such as NEMSP or AAA that's managing training on Prodigy, and also a member of a department that manages training on Prodigy. They can be members of multiple groups, have access to that training. Their training officers can see training that they've taken elsewhere, but still have an isolated experience for each of those departments. And when you have a user leave your department, one of the things we do is give them that account to take with them. I think too often they leave a department and that account is just gone. So a year from now, 2 years from now, they're reaching out to you asking if you have training records that they've completed with you from an old learning management system or in person. And as a training officer, you're going to be scrambling to try to find that certificate on March 30th for some airway class they took 2 years ago. When they leave your organization, they no longer have access to your organization's training. They no longer have free access to Prodigy. They could convert to an individual user. but all of their training records, any certifications that they've put in, they're still part of their account. So at any time they can log back in and download all those training records, get access to all of those training records, which is, from a training officer standpoint, just eliminating another headache for you for employees that leave your organization.
Yeah, and then from the provider side, it also gives them a peace of mind so that they know if maybe they retired or they left the organization and went somewhere else, they can pick up where they left off on their training plan and purchase an individual option and continue their education. They won't lose what they did before, so that they can complete their recertification without having to go back and try to get all the records. They always have what we call kind of their ledger of record or their transcript. So then from the provider standpoint, for the classes that were created by a training officer or a training plan that was created by a training officer, those can be assigned out and show up right on my dashboard as an assignment. And I get a little push notification. I get an email notification that it shows up right there on that dashboard. So I can do a single click button to get right into that assignment, whether it's a specific class or a group of classes in a training plan.
So if you're assigning a training plan, you have the option to select an initial date. So maybe you've been assigning classes as you've been going along and you realize this should have just been a training plan. You build a plan and you know some users have already completed some of those classes through assignment. You can actually add an initial date. So you can say anybody that's completed this class from January 1st on, that class will actually count as complete on the training plan. From a class perspective, when you assign a class, you can actually exclude people that have completed that class within the last year. So when you go to assign it, you can make sure you're only assigning it to people that haven't taken it. Now, for both of those assignments, you can set reminders. Every assignment will start with an email out to the provider. They'll get an email that says this assignment is due. Here's the due date. Here's who assigned it. It will show up on their dashboard. It will show up on their assignments tab. But from there, they won't natively get any additional emails unless you check off to remind them. And then they'll get reminder emails. This is 7 days due. This is 1 day till due. This is overdue. And they'll get those reminders until they complete it. Now, we do that to avoid that email fatigue. We want to make sure you're only sending reminders when you think it's important to do so for a class. And that just avoids our users from getting hundreds of emails from the system. And then they just start to ignore them because an email isn't necessarily a meaningful event. We want to make sure that every time they get an email from Prodigy, that it's a meaningful event and there's a reason for them to look at it. So the big question here is always, well, what does this cost me? And I'm going to throw this over to Ryan because this is really his wheelhouse. Can you talk a little bit about how pricing works on Prodigy?
Yeah, we treat Prodigy as seats, not users, because we understand that some providers may leave and some may come into your organization, and we don't want to charge you extra for those. So our pricing is $70 per seat per year. There's no startup fee. There's no annual maintenance fee. And then for enterprise accounts, for those departments that are larger than 300, reach out to us at sales@prodigyems.com, and we'll get you a pricing that meets your needs.
Thank you for joining us. We're excited to show you how Prodigy works. This wasn't designed to be a deep dive into every nuance of Prodigy, but really to give you an overview of the options that you have available to you. Please reach out to Ryan, sales@prodigyems.com. He's happy to do a full demo where he can go over how the system can be used in your individual organization, as well as set you up with a demo account. You can also view our documentation site, docs.prodigyems.com, where we walk you through each of these features in more depth. And this series will continue to build going through these different components of Prodigy.
And if you have any colleagues that missed this webinar, we'll put up the same class distributively on our webpage as we continue to add to it. So it'll always be available with the links right there in case you need to reach us. Thank you.